I'm standing here in Headstone Lane in the London Borough of Harrow, in front of what might be a very controversial piece of road infrastructure. One that on paper may sound great, but in practice is perhaps not. This is a width restriction, a traffic calming measure designed specifically to discourage the use of HGVs, heavy goods vehicles, and lorries from using these roads as shortcuts, and is also quite handy in slowing down drivers. It is usually paired with a bus gate. A width restriction is usually designed using large physical barriers with signs explaining how wide they are. This width is usually not enough for large HGVs to pass through, thus discouraging their use on these roads. But why were they invented? After the Second World War, car ownership skyrocketed all around the world, especially in Britain. In 1945, there were about 1.5 million privately owned cars in the UK. By 1975, that number had skyrocketed to 14 million. This meant that traffic was steadily increasing throughout the 20th century, and these brand new things called motorways were being invented too. Lorry and HGV drivers, whose jobs it were to deliver goods as fast as possible, needed to access these shiny new motorways. But with the increasing traffic, they couldn't do so without getting in the way of our lovely, quiet, suburban residential streets. Pretty soon, the inevitable happened, and these lorries started clogging up the roads, which sometimes included bus routes, making the situation worse for everybody. And so, in 1974, Harrow Council installed its first width restriction here on Camera's Avenue, in the suburbanising town of Edgware. But it wasn't without its problems. In the original plan, there were normal, ordinary width restrictions for cars, but also an adjacent bus bypass lane. These lanes were electronically operated, with a barrier that would automatically go up and down when a bus showed up, which would have looked something like this. However, the barriers were never installed due to fear of unnecessarily delaying the bus, so the bus bypass lane was just left open and drivers could literally use it whenever they wanted to. 2 years later, planners found a similar situation of an overuse of HGV lorries here in Headstone Lane, and there was also a primary school nearby, so it was now more important than ever that lorries be completely banned from this road. And so in 1976, Harrow's second width restriction came into place, and this time they even managed to get as far as to give the bus gate a barrier. This layout works significantly better than the one at Camera's Avenue, and would go on to become the blueprint for more width restrictions all over London. Over time, the bus barriers were eventually phased out and instead replaced with automatic number plate recognition systems and cameras, so anyone else except buses driving through the bus gate would be slapped with a heavy fine. So yes, the council found a great way to keep large lorries away from quiet suburban streets, but the width restriction is definitely far from perfect. In 2015, a man named Mr. Gower drove through the bus gate in a medical emergency to get his 94-year-old mother to the hospital. Harrow Council made the unfortunate decision to fine him £130. He tried appealing against the charge, explaining that it was a medical emergency, but Harrow Council refused to revoke the fine, to which Mr. Gower said, "It is time the council was taken to task over its shameful approach to collecting money at every possible turn, regardless of the circumstances." And you can't really blame him. Upon reaching the intersection, there are arrows in the road that guide you towards the middle of the road, but if you're speeding or new to the area, these can easily be missed. But at least they're there. All approaches on Camera's Avenue do have signs indicating that there's a width restriction a couple yards down the road, but in my opinion, these signs aren't really clear enough, and it most certainly does not tell you that it's the cars that have to go into the middle of the road and the buses that take up the corner. Instead, they could have used these signs that show clearly that the lanes are about to split in some way or another. Not just that, drivers pulling out of Dale Avenue who aren't familiar with the area will face quite a shock while trying to leave the street. In Headstone Lane on the westbound approach, the width restriction has been placed in such a way that it sits on a slight bend in the road, compared to the other side which is nearly dead straight. But if you haven't noticed, there's one key difference between the two places. In Headstone Lane, the bus gate sits in the middle of the road, where buses going both ways use the same bus gate, which is a lot more efficient, and it is the cars that have to take up the corner, which is a lot more easier to process for a driver. What we could do over here instead of this complex cluttering piece of infrastructure is remove it completely and replace it with smart bollards or barriers. We could bring back the barriers and place them about 3 meters above the ground, so that all cars and vans will still be able to safely pass underneath the barrier, and make the barriers go up when a bus is approaching. This can be done by placing weight sensors further down the road that detect when a bus is about to show up. Ultimately, I really do believe in the concept of a width restriction. I think it's one of the most simple yet effective designs, and that serves its purpose brilliantly. And so if it's properly cared for, well understood by drivers, and is as less inconvenient as possible, these things have the potential to go a long way.